Hello and good evening to another live session with Simeon. If you are on YouTube, I want to especially welcome you to another live session. Sorry, I have to set my camera. My speaker. Okay, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning from wherever you are watching me from. This is 8 o'clock West African time, and I believe probably in other countries this may be morning or afternoon. But I'm sending my general greeting to everybody who may probably watch this program after now. So, any time zone that you find yourself, I'm greeting you based on that time zone. In Nigeria today, this is evening and it's already 8 o'clock. I want to welcome you, especially to another live session, this time around not on Facebook, but on YouTube. I'll be coming on live every Saturday to discuss some practical issues that relates to wealth. And that is why the theme of this live session is wealth life experience. Wealth life experience with Simeon on YouTube. So if this is your first time on this platform, my name is Simeon Umar, and I will be teaching on the subject matter of wealth life experience. Under the wealth life experience, I'll be coming up with different topics that will definitely impact you positively, and it will also address certain conception, beliefs, mindsets that many people have about wealth. I will be coming here to open your mind to several misconceptions that people have about wealth. And not that alone, I will also be coming here to open your mind to so many ideologies that were not true, but you have been imparted with. It has already been installed in your mind. And it will take a greater effort from your part to actually rewire or renew such mindsets. So I want to really recommend this program to everybody and anybody that really want to discover new things about their life, about their background, identity, mindset, and new self discovery. And new self discovery. So today I will be sharing a topic that I titled The Illusion of Poor Background as a Recipe for Poverty. The illusion of poor background as a recipe for poverty. Let me start by saying that every man and woman born into this world has a background. Every man and woman born into this world has a background. But the truth is, many people struggle to accept the fact that we do not have the same background or we do not have similar background. We do not share the same story, no matter how similar they look like. Some people describe their background as poor background, humble background, comfortable background, or wealthy background. The fact is, some of these backgrounds are not really related to us personally. But the question is, how did we even came up or come up with those backgrounds? The fact is, some of these backgrounds are inherited based on the environment we find ourselves. Some of us, we allow the environment we find ourselves to give us certain definition, certain identity, some concept and mindset that are completely contrary or different to what we really are as a human being. Let me be very honest with you at this point that your background is completely different from everybody and anybody that's around you or that is around you, including either your younger brother or your elder brother. Your background are not really the same. You have a completely different background, even though you have same mother, you are from same mother, the same father. The fact is, your background are not the same. And I'm going to be sharing with you with evidences confirming to you that your background are not the same with anybody. Apart from the fact that I read through the scripture that is popularly called the Bible, which I have come to adopt as an investment manual. Probably when time permits me, I'm going to share with you what led me to that discovery. I've read through the passage of Bible where different people or patriarch had an encounter with God and they have different revelation about God. They have different identity about God. At some point, God actually revealed to them who He is, either through their dreams or personal encounter, vision, or whichever means through which they were able to have a divine encounter. And these people, by the time they came up or after those encounters, they came up with certain conclusion. They came up with certain divination. They came up with certain description about their experience with God. Some saw God as Jehovah Jireh. Some saw him as Jehovah Nissi. Some saw him with different names. At some point, he described himself to some people as I am that I am. He had different encounter with Abraham. He had different encounter with Noah. He had different encounter with Joshua. He has a different encounter with Moses. He has a different encounter with Elisha. He has a different encounter with Elijah. He has a different encounter with Jeremiah. He has a different encounter with David. Different encounter, different description, different definition. This also happened to me as well. I have my own encounter and I came to a conclusion that God is an investor. He invested his time, his resources, and energy to form the heaven and the earth. And after that discovery, I came out with a conclusion that the general book that we call Holy Bible has become my own investment manual. It is at the point of discovery that I came up with my own ideology about who God is. And I've been getting different interpretation, different revelation, different meaning to what I have been reading from the manual. Completely different from what I inherited, completely different from what I've heard from different men of God, completely different from what I watch online, completely different from what I read in the book. I came to my own understanding that God is an investor. And every passage of the investment manual that I read gave me, or it has been given me, different interpretation, different definition, different meaning, and having discovered this, I have been able to live a well balanced life. It will get to a point you also discover certain things that will rewire your mindset, that will change your mindset, change your belief, and change everything that you've inherited from your background. And after this discovery, I personally discovered that my background is completely different from everybody that I've come in contact with. We don't have the same background, including my own immediate brothers and sisters. And it was at the point of self discovery that I got to know all this. So it will get to a point when you also need to sit down and discover who you truly are. When I was reading different people's background and how they evolve and become what they eventually become in life, I came to a conclusion that even the people that were born by the same father and the same mother, they have different background. But unfortunately, the environment we find ourselves has given us different definitions through which we have already adopted, and those revelation or those definition and interpretation we've gotten based on the environment we find ourselves has really hindered us from discovering who we truly are. And that is why I'm coming out with this program to open your eyes, to open your mind to the things that will reshape your mind and redefine the way you see things around you going forward. Now, let me say something. In this live broadcast, I'll be diving into reality of identity. In this broadcast, I'll be diving into reality of identity, into reality of background, into reality of mindsets and self-discovery. Because until you truly understand yourself, you may continue to live based on borrowed definitions until you truly discover what you were made up of, until you truly discover who you are, until you truly discover what your true background is. You will continue to live based on borrowed definitions and inherited limitations and identity until you get to a point of discovery, until you get to a point when you address certain things about your life, until you get to a point you identify what you are as a person, you will continue to live on a borrowed identity and you'll be limited based on these inherited definitions. Now, let me say this to you. Why do I say we don't have the same background? How do I even discover that we don't truly have the same background? Growing up for me was terrible. I lived in an environment where eating every day was really, really terrible. Everybody believe in 3 square meal, but we don't have any square meal. We have to struggle to even sometimes get a better place to sleep. These are the foundation I find myself at some point. As I was growing up, things were tough and rough. Getting into school was really terrible. Having gotten to school, getting school fees was really terrible. Having gotten the school fees, passing exam was a greater challenge, was one of the greatest challenges I faced in school. And having passed my exam, graduated, getting a job was another terrible experience for me. This is my these are my experiences. You may have similar experience, but not the same. Your own experience might be similar to what I have, but I can tell you for free they are completely different. Because the experience I had was a formation for me. The experience I have were platform. They were the foundation on which my future was built. Those experiences were the strongest foundation for me because those are the things that shaped. I didn't know how to read and write until when I got to JSS2. And what I do today, I am grateful for the period that I could not read and write, because those period has really formed the habit that I now demonstrate or practice today. The period that I could not read and write were the foundation, were the experience that formed what I now do today as my daily routine or habit. Today, I dare not go anywhere without holding a piece or having a book with me, because I consume knowledge and information like food, believing that if I have known how to read and write when I was growing up, probably I would have done better. That is the assumption that I have. That probably the period, or let me say, those years that I could not read and write were wasted years, but they are not in the sense, in the true sense. Those periods were a period of formation for me. Probably if I could read and write during that period, I would have been exposed to some dangerous and terrible knowledge and information that will probably destroy or have negative effects in my life. Probably if I could read when I was in primary school and secondary school very well, I would have been exposed to some dangerous association, information, or environment that probably hindered my success in life. So at the point when I started understanding how to read and write, I began to read for the sake of consuming knowledge. I started reading for the sake of gathering information. I started reading for the sake of passing my exam, and I was able to do brilliantly well in my academics. I was able to perform excellently well in my academics because I could, in my imagination, if I have known how to do this before, probably I won't be where I was then. But those are solid foundation for me. If anybody should ask me, how was your background look like? Those are the solid foundation. Those are solid background as far as I'm concerned. I don't see them as humble background. I don't see them as poor background, because the interpretation you give any idea or any experience forms the way you behave, the way you carry yourself, and the way you see yourself on a daily basis. Let me say this again. The definition or the idea you develop about yourself define or dictate the way you behave, dictates the way you carry yourself, and also define the way you see things around you. If you have been always telling yourself that you have a poor background, you see the people with wealthy background as your enemy, or the people that are lucky and you are unlucky, or you are unfortunate. When you see yourself as somebody with humble or poor background, you begin to see limitations. Why certain things are not working out for you, it is because of your poor background. You begin to see things in different ways and manners. Why? Because your mindset has been configured telling you on a daily basis that you have a poor background, you have a humble background. At some point, there are some things that ordinarily, if you don't have such mindset, you will have tried to embark on, or you'll have tried to venture into. But because your mind has been configured as having a poor or humble background, you will be limited. You will be drawing yourself back from taking such risk. You will be avoiding certain environment or certain area, telling yourself, oh, who born me? My papa no get this. My mama no get this. You will be demonstrating limitations on a regular basis because of the mindset of your poor or humble background. And I'm here to tell you that those confessions that you usually make are not really from you. Those are the confessions that you've seen people ahead of you made, and you inherited them, believing that you have a similar background with these people. If I may ask you, the humble background that you have always been claiming, the poor background that you have always been claiming, who gave you such narrative? Where did you hear it from? Who told you that your background is poor? Who told you that you have a humble background? I can confirm to you today categorically that it's either you read this somewhere or you watch somebody saying it, or probably maybe your parents, your brothers, people ahead of you have said the same thing, and in your own mind, you concluded in your mind that your own background is similar to them. Before, I usually tell myself that I have a humble background, I have a poor background, because I have seen several people saying the same thing over and over again. Either in the book that I'm reading, the programs that I've watched, events that I've attended, or several live or online programs that I've watched. When people are introducing themselves, they usually say they have or came from a humble background, or came from a poor background, or came from a comfortable background. And one day I asked myself, what is your own background? Which background did you come from? And I realized that really backgrounds are not the same. My own background is completely different from other people's background. Because this background of a thing are the things that I heard people saying repeatedly, different people, including the people that I know personally and the people that I do not know. In other words, I also inherited those statements. We inherited some of these background statements from the people we respect, either in the society, in our family, or in our environment. These background statements are inherited. And I came to a conclusion that no, my own background is different. And I began to do a research I began to ask questions. I began to read books. I began to gather knowledge. I began to seek information for me to truly understand and define my own personal background. Like I said, the general book that we all call the Holy Bible. I read people's background. I read David's background, Joseph's background, even Jesus' background. Jesus, when he was here on earth, was rich. And the Bible says he became poor. In other words, he has a wealthy background, but he became poor. So if somebody were to ask Jesus, can you please tell us your background? I know Jesus would have probably said, I have a wealthy background. But if somebody should describe who Jesus was when he was on earth, they will say he had a poor background. Why? Because they know his parents. Supposedly Joseph and Mary, who happened to be his parents, they will probably consider them as poor people. So definitely Jesus will probably be called poor because of his background. But the fact remains that he was not poor. He became poor. He was not poor. But for him to fulfill his ministry, for him to fulfill his assignment, for him to fulfill his purpose, he became poor. It is also possible that the kind of background that you have was chosen by God for you to fulfill your purpose. That means your background is not really poor, but your purpose requires that you go through that background for you to fulfill the God's given purpose for your life. And that was the same conclusion I came up with. That God wanted me to have that background for me to fulfill the purpose He has chosen for me. So I don't really have a poor background. It is the purpose that God has chosen for me to carry out requires me to have such background. Because looking at what I've gone through and the experience that I've acquired, I discovered that I don't really have a poor background. I am wealthy. I am rich. My mind is rich. And everything I turn my hands upon to do, they prosper. So I am not even poor. But for me to fulfill God's given purpose for my life, I had to go through those periods. I have to go through those experiences. I have to go through those paths for me to acquire all the necessary knowledge that will form part of my destiny. That means I don't have poor background. And so also you need to begin to ask certain questions about your background. As I was reading the book, my investment manual, there was a certain man who was named Jabez. From what I read from the Bible that you and I have access to before, I eventually discovered it to be my investment manual. This young man who was called Jabez inherited or was given a bad name everywhere he goes to in his day. People see him as an unfortunate child. People see him as a child that was given back birth during a terrible period and season. And his name was called Jabez because his mother bore him out of sorrow, out of trouble, out of terrible experience. And they gave him that name. The question is, how did Jabez knew his background? He was able to discover his background by asking questions. And after asking those questions, either from his parents or from his people around him, he was able to now went to pray to God Almighty, who eventually changed his entire story. Probably you also need to do such research, ask questions. If you have opportunity to meet your parent, you may have to do it. I did it. I asked my mom series of questions because I also need to identify who I am. For me to rewire my mind, for me to know what I was set out to accomplish in life. So Jabez had to go and pray, and his story was changed. The same thing happened to Jacob. Jacob had his own experience too. Jacob could be regarded as somebody who has a wealthy background. But at some point, he had an encounter with God. And his name was changed from Jacob to Israel. Same thing Abraham. He has his own background. And I can tell you that Abraham also had a wealthy background because his father, that we read in the Bible, shows that he wasn't poor. But despite that, God had to call him from his father's house to a place that God has chosen for him to dwell. And God has to change his name from Abram to Abraham as the father of many nations. So, as a matter of fact, we don't have similar background. And let me also say, if we are to classify all human beings on this planet Earth, we were all poor. Yes. The only person that would probably give a worthy background to was Adam. Because God has already made everything before bringing him to life, to manage, to name, and to take care of what God has made. So Adam was the only wealthy man, if I may say it, on earth. He has a wealthy background because everything has been made even before he came to life. But talk of every other human being or any other human being, we all have a poor background. Because we have to, when I say poor background, we have no access to information. We are ignorant. We are not connected to anything. We have to learn everything from the scratch to a point of knowledge. So information wise, we are poor. Knowledge wise, we are poor. Connection wise, we are poor. Relationship wise, we are poor because we understood nothing from the day we were born. But I don't want to probably argue further on that. What I'm here to tell you is that your background is not as terrible as you think. Your background is not as bad as you think. Today, I was able to identify different people with different background who eventually became something in life. One of them was Elon Musk. I don't have time to dwell much on that. You can read it on my Facebook where I posted it today. Femi Otedola has his own background, even though, quote and unquote, people assume or believe that he has a wealthy background. But reading his book, I discovered that this man actually fought his way through. He had his own terrible experience. And the same also is Dangote. Dangote lost his dad at the age of 6 or thereabouts. It was his grandfather that actually trained him to school. So environment has a lot to do with what you become in life. If your current environment is not giving you the kind of future you want to experience, it is highly important or essential for you to change your environment. If your current environment is not giving you the kind of future you want to experience, it is highly important for you to begin to change your current environment because environment has a whole lot to play in your future or as far as your background is concerned. Or you can see your current background as the foundation that you are working on that is capable to take you from where you are to where you want to be. So please begin to ask the right question from today. If you want to really identify who you truly are, what God has made you to be, you need to begin to ask the right questions. So don't accept the definition, the identity that your environment, your background has given to you. Begin to ask yourself, who am I? How do I begin to demonstrate the kind of life that I was made to live? You need to begin to reject some of the labels that your environment has given to you. Jesus was called different names. He was called the son of carpenter. That is the definition or the label, the identity that the community or the environment he grew from gave to him. But he had to reject some of this identity because he has discovered who he was. He discovered who he was. How did he do that? He read books. He read Torahs. That was the book that were available those days. He read books and he was even able to discover that he was God. And he confirmed it that haven't you read that you are gods? Do you also know that you are God? You are not an ordinary man. I discovered this too by virtue of reading and acquiring knowledge. I discovered that, wow, I am not an ordinary man. I am extra from the ordinary. And I began to demonstrate such identity. I began to carry myself with the new identification or the new identity I discover about myself. That is the kind of life I want you to discover. That is the kind of life I want you to live. Begin to ask yourself some questions that will redefine your identity, that will begin to give you the exact picture that you have, that God has designed you to be. You may be wondering that, Simeon, how did I even come up with my background statement? How did I find myself in this situation? How did I come up with this identity that I've wrongly given myself? One, I want to give you what I call thought formation stages. Thought formation stages actually exposes, or this actually expose how we eventually carry certain identities about ourselves. I call it thought formation stages. These are the stages through which we inherited some of this identity or the concept, the habit we demonstrate or we carry out on a daily basis. One, I call it self consciousness. The day you were born and people began to call you by your name and you recognized yourself to that name, you are gaining consciousness. You are beginning to understand certain things about yourself, that, oh, this is me that they are calling. Simeon, Simon. Oh, somebody calls this name. Nobody around actually responds to that name. But with the eye contact and the body language of that person, I discovered that they are actually calling me. That means this is my name. So the moment they call that name, and I look at the body language of that person who is calling the name, I began to gain consciousness that this is me, that this person is calling. At that point, I've identified my name. And the more people call you with that name, the more you gain consciousness about your name. So whenever anybody calls you by your name, even if you are two going together, you know that this is your name. At that level, you are already identifying your name with yourself, because nobody actually bears that name at that point. So in your circle, probably as you were growing up, when your mother or your father say certain things and you grab them and you accept them, you are already gaining consciousness based on what you heard. And that is what I call self-consciousness. The second one is thought process. The moment you begin to hear those things repeatedly, you begin to absorb them, and those things begin to form certain meanings in your mind, and you carry out certain things based on what your self-consciousness have discovered, and you are not beginning to think about those things. If they have mentioned certain things around you and you identify yourself with those things, you begin to process those thoughts until those things has meaning to you. How do I mean? When someone says, Simeon, go and bring that cup, in your mind, you process those thoughts. And because by definition, you know that this is cup, you automatically go there and bring it. Why? Because you've heard people repeatedly calling that thing by its name. And as time goes on, you began to hear the name of things, you begin to know the name of cities, you begin to know different people in your environment, you begin to identify with those things, and then your thought process continue to grow and improve. So in your immediate environment, you have already gained some level of consciousness. You have already developed some thought processes, and those things are already forming the kind of being you are going to become in life, except you get to a point of self-discovery and you begin to dissociate yourself from certain things. So during the thought process as you are growing up, you are already developing habits. And that takes me to the next point: habit formation. From your environment where you grew up from, you begin to form from some habits right from your home, right from the school you attended, either primary school or secondary school. Basically primary school, because those are the formation period, formative age. By the time you begin to associate yourself with your friends, other people in your environment, you're already forming some habits. And those habits are already becoming part of you. Those habits are already attached themselves to you. So whether you like it or not, you are beginning to accept some ideology. You are beginning to absorb some information. You are beginning to accept your beliefs, certain beliefs, as part of your own identity. So at this level, you believe everything that anybody tells you. And that is why when you say you are a Christian, it's a product of the self-consciousness, thought processes, and habit formation. You accepted those beliefs as part of you, and nobody can dare change all those beliefs except you come to a point of self-discovery. The next one is cultural formation. You identify yourself as this is the kind of culture we I am. These are the things that my parent told me. These are the culture, these are the things we do in our house. These are the way we greet our parents. These are the way we respond to elders. These are the things we do as a family. You're already forming some personal culture that will eventually form who you eventually become in life. So these things happens between the age of, let's say, 3 to 15. At the age of 15, you've absorbed a lot of thoughts, meanings, ideology, concepts that will form part of you even when you are 30. And if care is not taken, you will continually live by those ideologies. You will always believe that those ideologies are the standard of living, of behavior, of survival. It is a product of the environment you find yourself. So it will get to a point when you need to begin to ask yourself, are these things truly, are they really true? Are they the things that I should live by? Do I 100% accept this ideology as who I am? Until you get to a point of discovery, you will continue to believe whatsoever anybody tells you about yourself. The next one is adult formation. At this level, nobody can change anything you've believed. It has become part of you. And that is why you find it difficult to even accept the fact that you are wealthy. You find it difficult to even accept the fact that you can move from this level to another level. You find it difficult to make certain decisions because your background has wired certain things into your life that if care is not taken, it will be difficult for you to change them. So these are the processes through which you form, you develop some habit, you develop some culture, you develop some character, you eventually discover yourself, even though that is not who you are. And I'm here to tell you that it is high time for you to begin to rediscover yourself. It is high time for you to begin to do certain things that will form a new you. And that takes me to the next point that says, how or what do I do to rewire my mindset? What do I do to rediscover my background that I have developed over time? What will you do to rewire your mind? What will you do to rediscover yourself? One, you need to have a secret place. When I say a secret place, you need to be spiritually intelligent. And that is the place of spiritual intelligence. I always tell people there are three major intelligences you must have: social intelligence, emotional intelligence, and spiritual intelligence. At this point, for you to rediscover and rewire your mind, you really need spiritual intelligence. And you also need to have what I call a secret place where you can pray regularly to rediscover yourself. The next thing, you need to ask the right questions, including the one that you may not have the right answer to at the moment. Ask the right questions, including the ones that you may not even have the right answers to. I did it to myself. I began to ask certain questions. I began to ask certain things about myself. The one that I could not even get answer to, I asked them. You need to begin to read, and read. Keep learning, keep improving yourself, and keep discovering yourself. These are the things you need to be doing going forward in order to rediscover your new background. Challenge your current position. Challenge your past. There are certain things about your past that are wrong. You need to begin to challenge your past. Begin to rewire your mind. There are some things that you were told to be true, but now they are not really true. Time will not permit me to identify those things. The lie that our forefather passed on to us that Africa is poor, this thing is not true. There are certain beliefs we need to begin to change. Now, another thing is don't blame anybody for your past failure or errors. You need to stop blaming people for your errors, for your past failures. Stop blaming people. Don't blame anybody for your past errors and mistake. The more you blame people for your past error, the more you will be limiting yourself to a new discovery. Forgive people. Forgive people where necessary. Don't hold anybody in your mind. Forgive people. Practice daily forgiveness. Practice daily forgiveness. That is a pathway out of old mindset, fixed mindset. You need to begin to forgive people that have offended you and find new interpretations to some meanings that you have before. Find new interpretation to old meanings and definitions, description you've inherited. Begin to look for new meanings if necessary. Challenge old concepts, old ideology. Challenge them. That is the point of discovery. And lastly, start learning new things. Start learning new things. That is the best way to rediscover yourself. Tell yourself that you don't have a poor background because poor background limits your potential. The more you believe in your poor background, the more you'll be disconnecting yourself from certain things that you can actually do in reality. Your poor background will be telling you that you don't have money to carry out certain things. Your poor background will be telling you that you are not competent enough to carry out certain things. Your poor background will be telling you that you are not capable to achieve certain things. But the more you believe in that ideology or concept, the more you are drawing yourself away from the purpose that God has designed for you. So begin to ask yourself certain things that will take you from where you are to where you want to be. So, and this is the level you begin to experience new life, wealth, life experience. At this level, you will now know that truly your background is not really the same with every other person around you. You have a different background from everybody around you. Your background is not the same as my own background. Your background is not the same as your brother or your sister. Your background is completely different. If your destiny is not the same with your brother or sister, so also is your background. But how do you discover your background? By asking questions, reading books, having a secret place where you pray, practicing a life of forgiveness, and challenging your past history. So these are the few things I have in mind to say today, and I hope you've gained one or two things. Until next week, Saturday, until I come your way for another interesting topic, I want you to begin to see yourself as a wealthy person with a wealthy background. Believe yourself, believe in your capacity, believe in your dream. Even if you don't have what it takes to accomplish your dream today, believe that those dreams are valid, those goals are valid, those visions are valid. And by the time you begin to see yourself as a new person with a new mindset, you begin to see the results for everything you'll be doing going forward. Thank you and see you next week, Saturday. Bye bye.